think most people would agree the Frankenstein era is most certainly upon us in the sim racing world. And in this video, I've been sent a little something from the guys at VTSC Racing, which completely unlocks the ES wheel from the MOZA ecosystem. And in the true spirit of things, I've Frankensteined my Logitech G27 pedals with my now USB connected ES wheel. And to keep everything completely different, it's connected to a wheelbase that isn't the R5. Oh, and let's not forget the wheel clamp everyone loves. So recently the guys at VTSC Racing reached out to me about a mod they're about to launch, specifically for the MOZA ES wheel. Now it sounds a little scary, but we're going to completely switch out the printed circuit board, or PCB, inside the wheel itself. Inside is simply a micro USB slot for connecting the wheel directly to the PC as an input device for mapping all the buttons in game, and no longer via the Pithouse software. This all is enabled via the widely used SimHub software to get it all recognised. The wheel itself is completely independent then of any wheelbase you fix it to, and with a quick Google there are hardware adapters everywhere to help out with this. You'll notice that the largest buttons on the wheel, the radio and start buttons, have been replaced with two encoders. These both click down as traditional buttons but are also input dials for extra functionality, and personally I've been using these in game for scrolling through the various HUD menus, which is pretty handy. You also get smarter LEDs, which I'll come to you later, and less tinny clicks from the gear shifts. And it's worth a quick note that this is only PC compatible, as the ESX wheel itself contains a chip inside to enable all that Xbox goodness. So why are we interested in this mod exactly? There's already a MOZA Universal Hub kit that unlocks the latest wheels from the ecosystem, but not for the ES or ESX wheel. So that's the niche that makes up part of this why. And if I was Frankensteining something together on a budget, personally, I think the ES wheel with all its wheel rim mods is one of the best options around for the price point. I mean, to tell you the truth, I did seriously consider buying a second ES or ESX wheel, which would allow me to easily switch between a GT and a rounded wheel depending on the game preference. And I reckon I can't be the only one weighing that up as a solid secondary wheel option. Right, that's enough about the ES wheel and why it was chosen for the mod. Let's also not forget that unlike just 3 years ago maybe, people aren't afraid to mix and match these days, even if it's a little more hassle. And of course some people want to avoid complexity completely, whilst others do love the challenge. And the Frankensteining is becoming normalised. Most brands have done their best to facilitate it into their current product line, and although slightly messier with the extra cable hanging out the back of the wheel, done right, it shouldn't impact the rotation by getting snagged, and that is the cost of freedom. Right, let's have a run through of the install, shall we, along with lessons learned, what's hot and what's not. But before you get started, ideally you want to order yourself a coiled micro USB cable, because as things currently stand, that's not going to be included. 2 guides are supplied fitting the PCB, which we're obviously doing first, and the SimHub setup, which we'll come to afterwards. Now, the prospect of taking the wheel completely apart can be daunting, and I had the same thoughts most of you are probably having right now. Will I break it? Can I put it all back together again properly, or reverse what I've done? Completely normal anxieties to have. Right, first thing we're going to do is remove the usual front bolts which hold the wheel rim and the quick release, or QR, together. The next step is going to be detaching the cable from the QR. Now, I'm not going to lie, but the next bit was the least fun out of everything. You should be able to use a screwdriver to detach the clips either side of the connector, and I am reliably informed that on the later versions of the wheel, the cable is facing up instead of sideways on the board like mine is, which is a much easier job. Now, I may or may not have loosened some wires once I did get it out, but it all goes back together again, so no big deal. Right, first lesson learnt, put the wheel face down on a soft surface mouse mat or cloth of some kind, because using my table I've scuffed some of the text off the buttons, which has really annoyed my OCD. Next lesson learnt, once all the screws are undone to expose the PCB, don't open it this way around, because all the springs will fall out and it doesn't help you visualize where they were in the first place. So I chucked all the springs back in just to redo it for the sake of the video, and this is a hell of a lot better. So just a couple more screws and the original PCB will detach completely. Lovely. And it's also worth at this stage just taking a mental note of which way around the D-pad plastic goes, just so you don't have to rewind this video and double check like I did. And finally, we're just removing the start and radio labelled buttons just to make way for the new encoders that stick out. Right, it's finally time to open up the replacement PCB and take a look at the thing. The guys have packed mine with the encoders attached, which do pull off with the right amount of force. Don't be shy, like I was. And because they're pretty standard encoders, and don't quote me on the exact sizing here, but you can find plenty of third-party encoder styles should you wish to switch them out. So let's get on with it and fit the new PCB, shall we? Being sure to align everything and hoping that gravity keeps the buttons where they should be. Which of course it didn't, and I completely failed first time around, meaning you can conveniently learn from my mistakes. You are welcome. And with that corrected, we are looking a lot better. However, as we turn the thing around, it's not quite looking flush, is it? And the main reason for this is actually the size of the LED lights that you can see here, which are a lot larger than the originals. I mean, once it's done up, it's only very small margins, to be honest, but it's enough to make the buttons on the outer edge require slightly harder press in order to register a click. Right, after all that, I feel like we need to speed things up now. We are going to get the two screws back in to hold the PCB and the buttons in place. We're going to chuck the encoder buttons on. We're going to load the springs back where they should be. And we're going to plug in the micro USB and thread it through the hole for the quick release. Voila. And then comes the slightly tricky part where the best thing to do here is hold the gear shift paddles and with a little bit of force pulling them apart, slowly lower it down until you align the springs underneath. Now this might take a couple of goes, but I promise you, you'll get there in the end. And once you've double checked that it's flush and the gear shifters are clicking nicely before throwing all the screws back in, we're nearly home and dry now. The little QR adapter, which allows the USB cable to pass through, pops on next and is relatively well behaved. It's staying put while you hold everything else in place. And with that, whichever wheel you've got pops on next. And don't forget the earthing spring most people forget about. Followed by trying to hold it all together with one hand while you throw the screws through the front of it and secure it all in place. Hope you've got big hands. So our work here is done, check it out. But also worth mentioning that with everything now in place and tightened up, how flush the PCB was sitting is no longer really an issue. And in no way are the buttons feeling like they're clicking fresh air on the outer edges. They may sometimes need about 10% more pressure than usual to register a click, but that concludes that potential negative point. Otherwise all good, and I'm sure you'll agree, it looks pretty good. And now for a very quick run through of what's required for SimHub once you've got it all installed. First thing we want to do is add the feature we want, which will be the custom serial devices. Toggle that on. Now we want to register the wheel via our newly added menu item. Enable the feature, assuming your wheel is plugged in of course. You'll find it under the serial port drop-down. Then we want to import the pre-cooked settings supplied by VTSE for download from their website with the guides from earlier. This will provide 3 lighting profiles and some code related to the RPM values. And here we are checking out what profile 1 looks like, and profiles 2 at the bottom and 3 at the top. However, I found that even with the minimum RPM dialed right down, it didn't really get enough LED movement accelerating through the gears. So all I did next was paste the code into ChatGPT and asked it to reduce the minimum RPM by 10%, and it did, which meant that I could tweak things manually, which was perfect. Bonus config I didn't know existed, so there you go. And of course the wheel is now a completely different device as far as the games are concerned, and I've had exactly 0 issues updating all the button mappings, so all good. Pretty simple final thoughts. If you're in the market for something that just unlocks the ES wheel, then the offering from VTSE Racing does exactly that. And you know what? At around $30, I don't think it's bad value either, and it's been a good product to cover and something different. As someone who works in the tech industry, I do love checking out new toys, so a big thank you to VTSE for reaching out and offering me this opportunity, and it's been fun testing things out, providing some early feedback. And always worth a mention that I'm not affiliated or making money out of VTSE in any way, shape or form, which keeps me completely impartial. So around 3 years ago I joined a startup because I kind of enjoy the challenge basically, and the guys behind these new creations are doing just that. So if I can support the new boys coming through with some content creation, then quite honestly that's all I'm after, and I wish them the best because they've got some good stuff in the pipeline. So We'll see how things shake out. And finally, I'll leave as much detail as possible in the description if you're interested, and as usual, hope this has been useful in some way, and cheers for watching.